Thank you very much for having me. My name is Anthony Eichenlaub, and this is a homecoming for Four Will Sunderlands. And the excerpt that I have for you is pretty early in the story. It's kind of when we meet the Four Will Sunderlands, and I'll let it kind of speak for itself. When the Four Will Sunderlands finally arrived, Andrea had her hands deep in the cool soil under a warm spring sun. It was time to plant her garden, the one Will had built in her front yard the year before he'd left. Radishes already poked through the soil, and with the risk of frost all but gone, it was time to plant tomatoes. The four of him stood wordlessly as the day they were born, each stock still, until Andrea happened to look up from the garden. "Emma," said the Will on the left. Andrea's trowel tumbled to the earth. There stood her boy. Four of him, exact duplicates if the papers from the Quentin Alexander government were to be believed, time clones. They didn't look exactly the same. One had a neatly trimmed beard covering his handsome face. Another stood so thin the ridges of his cheekbones showed under pale skin, and his uniform draped over his stick bones like a sheet over a line. The Will on the left elbowed the one next to him. "Told you she'd have a fit if we showed up all at once. Looks like she's gonna stroke out and we'll finally inherit that garden we always wanted." Andrea pushed herself to her feet and eyed the four boys. "Will," she said, not sure how to take it all in. "We'll stop you there," the Will spokesman said. "We agreed that none of us can be Will anymore. I'm Willie. This here's Bill, William, and Josh." "Josh?" Willie shrugged. "He didn't want to be Billy, and I don't blame him." The others nodded in agreement. The idea behind this one is that it kind of revolves around this character of Will, and the idea is that he went to war, and that somewhere in space there is a portal that you go through, and you come out 2 minutes earlier. And if the 2 minutes earlier you stops the original you from going in, then there are two of you, and you've got a time clone. And a big war was fought over this resource. And it ended, and the side that Will was on lost. So now he's returning home, kind of defeated, and with four different versions of him who survived, and they've all got very, very different experiences with this war. In this story, the characters are really, really critical to how this is going to work, because it doesn't really work if you think about the Wills as all being the same. And the challenge with this one was that Will is the same person up until when he leaves for war, and then we get to see his different experiences in war. One of them kind of has a post-traumatic stress disorder thing, and one of them starved for ages, stranded somewhere, and comes back and ends up having an eating disorder because of it. And one of them was just kind of shunted off to the side and had really no experience at all. And there's a debate about, okay, who is the original Will? And it kind of comes out that none of them are really the original. None of them are the guy who left. They have all changed in some way, and thinking about how that change affects people is really at the core of this story. Andrea is defined by sort of this, her relationship to these four characters as they come back, and how does she handle one of them turns towards crime, and one of them has this eating disorder, and how does she relate to each one of them in different ways, and one of them reminds her very much more like her original son, and she wants to connect with that one more, but she finds that that's really not what she should do. She ends up solving a lot of the problems, but there are problems that she has trouble solving, and she has to cope with that too. Oh, Quentin was he's probably the least interesting character to me, because he's just kind of this, he's the enemy. Like, he's the enemy, but also he's taken over the world, and now he's just sort of a fish out of water. He doesn't know what to do with all of this world that he took over, which he took over kind of after starting this war. The only way to finish it was to win, and he won, and now he's got this world and a million of himself, and none of them likes bureaucracy, but everything they do seems to lead to more bureaucracy. So they're just kind of bogging the entire world down, and we get to meet one or two of him, and they don't have as easy a time differentiating themselves the way Will does, but it's kind of their own struggle. I find that a lot of, I usually advise like science fiction, fantasy writers to really, really focus on characterization, because you probably already have this great idea. A lot of us science fiction writers are engineers. We know how to come up with a good idea, a really, really cool tech idea, or, the way an engine works in our starship, or whatever. We're really good at coming up with that, and we can describe it. But what's better is to come up with a good character that the reader can connect to. And when a reader connects to a character, and the character is in awe of whatever this great idea is, then the reader is dragged along with. So the reader cares because the character cares. And I think that this characterization is really key to a good idea story. Yeah, there's one that I kind of read recently that I loved. It's called A Song for a New Day by Sarah Pinsker. And the reason I love it right now is I just got my second COVID vaccine. So this book is about, the idea is there's a pandemic, which I find very plausible right now. And the pandemic and the world events cause people to retreat to their homes and sort of live their lives virtually. And the technology kind of accepts this and builds an economy around it. And the music industry adopts, instead of having concerts, they're having just these virtual concerts. And it talks about, okay, what if 20 years from now, we've just accepted this and this is how it is? And how do we break out of that? How do we let go of our fear of something that is no longer really a threat? This pandemic is long gone. And it's all from the point of view of music, like the music industry, and just how music affects us as a community and as people, and how it moves us to be together. It was one that really hit me, and again, it's one that the characterization is fantastic. That I really got into the head of the younger character who has lived her whole life in sort of this virtual stay-at-home world, and the older character who is a musician and is used to playing concerts and who loved playing concerts and can't really do that anymore. And she has sort of fallen into this habit of low-grade rebellion, and she's just kind of coasting out, and then something happens and she is challenged to do something more, to actually go out and change the world. And I thought it was a fantastic idea and a fantastic book, and it was written just a little bit before the pandemic hit, so the timing was a little weird for this book, but it's a good one. Yeah, I think characterization is critical for idea stories, and to me anyway. I think that I'm willing to admit that there are a lot of good idea stories out there that have really succeeded without great characterization. I mean, the one that comes to mind is like 2001: Space Odyssey. I don't really remember the characters at all. I watched it a long time ago, but I don't really remember. I mean, there's Dave, because Hal, says, I can't do that, Dave. But I don't remember anything about him, but it really is a powerful idea story, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on in there. So I am willing to admit that, okay, you can have idea stories that don't have great characterization, but they're so much better when they do. Because when I read a story, I connect with the characters, and connecting to the characters will just bring me along. If they are in awe, I am in awe. If they are afraid, then I am afraid. That's just how I experience stories. For publishing this story of mine, I really do appreciate them doing that.